We've now entered the end stages. The Ten Tails has evolved into shinju gods, beings that have gained self-awareness, beings that now possess sentience. Now that then begs the question, how did this happen? What led to this evolution? Well, the answer to that question lies within the secrets of Code's Karma Seal and the history of Kaguya's original Ten Tails. You see, one thing we know for certain is that these beings were created using the physical essence of someone who got turned into a tree. This was proven by the Sasuke and Bug Shinju lookalikes having one thing in common, which is that the individuals they stole their parents from are now trees. We also know that an individual is turned into a tree after being bitten by one of Code's claw grimes, the same claw grimes created using the body of the Ten Tails. So with all that circumstantial evidence, the current conclusion would be the most logical. Now, the mechanic behind the creation of these new entities is a bit more complex, in the sense that there's one common trait that is likely shared by all the humans who evolved into Shinju, which is that they all possess the DNA of the Otsutsuki. You see, as explained by Amado in chapter 45, the Otsutsuki are alien parasites whose only goal is to devour the life of a planet. They do this by planting a large divine tree in the ground. Its roots then grows deeply, reaching across every corner of the planet and sucks the chakra from all living things. This tree then produces a chakra fruit once it has finished absorbing everything. These chakra fruits are explained to be lumps of tremendous energy and genetic information. Otsutsukis continuously update themselves by eating them. That is how they evolve. Now, there's one key detail that's missing, which is that Otsutsuki's always utilize a Ten Tails when assaulting a planet, and that's because the Ten Tails is what becomes a divine tree. The Ten Tails is actually a seedling they first plant into the ground, which then grows into the divine tree and consumes the planet, thus bearing a chakra fruit. Now, one important thing to note is that you can't just bear the Ten Tails and water it for it to become a divine tree. There's one special condition that must be met. That, of course, being the fact that you must feed a living Otsutsuki to the Ten Tails for it to begin evolving. That is actually why the Otsutsuki's travel in pairs, because one needs to be fed to the god tree while the other Otsutsuki procures the fruit it creates in the end. This also explains why Code needs to feed Boruto to the god tree in order for it to bear the chakra fruit. This of course leads into Code becoming an Otsutsuki, since feeding Boruto to the Ten Tails would introduce Otsutsuki DNA into the process of molding the fruit. Oh, and by the way, this is the same process explained by the Shinju in chapter 4 of Boruto 2 Blue Vortex. He states that we divine trees exist to suck the chakra out of all living things and form a chakra fruit. Well, at least that was the original instinct of the divine tree, which we'll address in a second. Also note that Shinju in the context of the Naruto universe means Jubi, which is another name for the Ten Tails. So when he says we divine trees, it's the same thing as him saying Shinju, since the Ten Tails is also what evolves into the divine tree. So what I'm trying to get at here is that in order for the Ten Tails to evolve into the divine tree, it has to consume Otsutsuki DNA. That is a stated fact. Yet, for some reason, this Ten Tails was seemingly able to evolve into multiple divine trees by biting Sasuke and Bug. It just doesn't make sense. Well, until it kinda does. You see, what most fail to realize is that a lot of the existing shinobi possess Otsutsuki DNA at a deeper level, and that's because a lot of them are descendants of Hagoromo and Hamura. This makes perfect sense since Kaguya was said to have lived peacefully amongst the humans and was impregnated by an emperor called Tenji. Now, after Kaguya was betrayed by this emperor, she consumed the chakra fruit from the divine tree and used its power to place the entire planet under the infinite Tsukunomi Genjutsu. Though she did release some of the humans later on because she didn't want all of them to die. Then of course, as the story goes, months later she gave birth to her two sons, Hagoromo and Hamura, who after finding out about the remaining humans stuck within infinite Tsukunomi, thus being killed and turned into white Zetsus, decided to confront Kaguya. The brothers in the end ended up sealing Kaguya using 6 paths Shibaku Tensei, and both went their separate ways. Hamura decided to guard Kaguya, who was sealed on the newly created moon, and Hagoromo remained on the planet to later share his chakra with the other humans in an effort to connect everyone through the concept of ninshu. However, this same chakra was later used by the humans to wage war against each other and resulted in the formation of clans humans who shared similar bloodline traits as a result of that chakra. The most prominent of all being the Senju and the Chiya, who are direct descendants of Hagoromo's bloodline through his sons Ashura and Indra, while the Hyuga clan members are all descendants of Hamura, who went to the moon at the end of the battle with Kaguya. So what this means is that you have two subsets of humans who possess the capacity to wield chakra, the ones who were just given the chakra by Hagoromo and later passed it on to their descendants, and then you have the ones who possess Otsutsuki DNA by way of being genetic descendants of Hagoromo's sons who procreated on the planet. Now, the genetic data of the Otsutsuki in these individuals at this point in time wouldn't be enough to consider them full-blown Otsutsukis, but the genetic data is still present within their bodies. What this means is that the Ten-Tails could possibly evolve into a mini divine tree by consuming these individuals, but it wouldn't be enough for them to produce a chakra fruit. So these new entities aren't created by just absorbing random individuals. If that was the case, you would have had multiple or thousands of them running around, since that's the amount of Clawgrime's code created. In fact, it is even shown to us that multiple leaf ninja were turned into trees after being bitten by the Clawgrimes, and this was even confirmed in chapter 4. Yet only 4 divine trees were created, 2 of which are confirmed to be Sasuke and Bug. Now that then brings us to the 2 other divine trees who I believe to be Jigen and Moegi. Now this makes perfect sense, since how we were able to confirm that the other 2 divine trees were Sasuke and Bug was by cross-referencing their physical appearances. The short bearded tree looks like Bug and the hooded figure has Sasuke's physical appearance. Not only that, since the supposed clone of Sasuke also possesses the ability to use Chidori, that too with his dominant left hand. The story also goes out of its way to imply this by code referring to the entity as Bug and Boruto reacting to the reveal of the Sasuke Shinju. So by using that same logic, you can come to the logical conclusion that the female Shinju came from Moegi based on their shared physical traits. In addition to that, the entity also used the same Earth-style grabber technique Moegi used on Amado in order to restrain Boruto. So the writer can't be any clearer, he's basically spoon-feeding us at this point. Now what's more contentious is the identity of the Jigen-looking Shinju, who is clearly the strongest member of the group. I personally believe that this guy was created using the essence of Jigen, but not in the way you might think. You see, as I stated at the start of this video, it all goes back to the secrets of Code's Karma Seal. This technique or chip is stated to be an highly compressed Otsutsuki backup file. Once the file itself is implanted into the prospective vessel, the compressed data is slowly extracted over time. Now once all of that data is fully extracted, that is when the Otsutsuki will fully resurrect within that body and the person will cease to exist. And just to clarify, the Karma Seal not only consists of the DNA of the Otsutsuki, but also their chakra, which is separate from the chakra of the vessel itself. This was even confirmed to be the case in chapter 64 when Boruto first uses True Essence form. Code, upon seeing this power, initially thought that Momoshiki was in control because he sensed a different type of chakra, which is why then said that Boruto is quite a puzzle. Momoshiki's consciousness, why does it emerge to this degree when Boruto is still only just a vessel? Of course, it was later revealed that Boruto was still in control of his body and he was just manifesting more of Momoshiki's power and chakra. This relates back to Code, since Code also possesses the Karma Seal of an Otsutsuki, that being Shiki Otsutsuki himself. However, the issue is that for some reason, people believe that Code doesn't possess Ishiki Otsutsuki's data or DNA when that was never stated to be the case. In fact, that just wouldn't make any sense. The Karma Seal itself is a compressed Otsutsuki backup file, which consists of the chakra and DNA of the Otsutsuki, and the chakra itself is generated by the DNA of said Otsutsuki. So Code, by having Ishiki's Karma Seal, does possess Ishiki's data within that Karma Seal. The only difference between Code and Kawaki is that Kawaki was able to become a proper vessel by way of being Otsutsukified, while Code could not, thus being unable to become a receptacle for Ishiki's soul. This simply means that the Karma Seal is unable to extract its data and Otsutsukify Code's body, but the Karma Seal itself that is lodged within Code's body still does consist of that data. Now this is just a theory, but I believe that Jigen's Otsutsukified data is also a part of Code's Karma Seal, which is why it likely led to the Karma Seal being defective. This makes sense since even though Jigen was 100% Ishiki, he still retained his physical appearance, which means that a portion of the vessel's genetic data is still retained even post Otsutsukification. So what likely happened is that the Ten-Tails was able to gain access to some of that data through Code's claw marks that he used to squeeze the Ten-Tails, thus creating the claw gripes. And by the way, these are the same claw marks Code said were created by mixing the iron from his blood with physically embodied chakra. So that would then make them half material and half chakra. Now, aside from the writer clearly telling us this for a specific reason, it's also possible that the physically embodied chakra and the iron from Code's blood is also extracted from the karma seal in order to create these claw marks. We have to remember that Amado stated that Code's claw mark ability is classified as shinjutsu, which means that it's a divine ability stemming directly from the Otsutsuki. He then further clarified that these abilities can't be created, he can only transfer them from an Otsutsuki through cell or data migration. So this simply means that Code got this ability directly from an Otsutsuki. The real question is from who? We know it isn't Ishiki since he didn't have that ability, and it likely isn't Shibai since Amado never stated that it came from him. In fact, when this was first revealed, Amado specifically stated that Ada and Damon's abilities came from Shibai and also confirmed that Kawaki's Shinjutsu came from Ishiki, which was fairly obvious. Yet when it came to Code, he just passively stated that these claw marks are also Shinjutsu. He purposely never stated where they came from since he likely doesn't know. Now, to be fair, a lot of things about Code is unknown. Why did his hair turn white after his limiters were removed? Why did his nails turn black? Why did his eyelashes extend? And why did his eye color change? These are physical appearances occurring even though his data or DNA was never changed. Another thing to point out is that Amado himself stated that Code never had his body modified in order to increase his power. In fact, they had to implant a limiter into him since his power somehow surpassed Jigen. By the way, the only way this makes sense is if the power that allowed him to surpass Jigen came from the Karma Seal since Code wasn't modified to increase his power. This is directly stated by Amado. What this also means is that Code's ability to use his claw marks comes from whatever mutation happened with the Karma Seal Jigen implanted into him. So in essence, all of these divine tree entities were created using the Otsutsuki data and chakra within Code's claw marks, along with the Otsutsuki data they found within the individuals they were able to copy. So Sasuke clearly has Otsutsuki DNA by way of him being an Uchiha, Jigen was clearly Otsutsuki, and Moegi likely has Otsutsuki DNA since she was able to use wood release. Now I believe that to be the case since everyone who has naturally been able to use wood release descended directly from Hagoromo, which makes perfect sense since he siphoned the power of the Ten-Tails whose natural affinity is wood release. Bug on the other hand is likely someone tied to some family who possess Otsutsuki DNA. That could work since not everyone who descended from the Otsutsuki magically possessed great power. Look at the Uchiha, most of them were farmers and poets, so I think the logic does track and makes perfect sense. Now in regards to them gaining self-awareness, this also goes back to Kaguya since it's somewhat similar to what happened in the past with Kaguya and the original Ten-Tails. As I pointed out in my recent video about Boruto resurrecting Kaguya, the original Ten-Tails was already on the planet in the form of a god tree before Kaguya arrived. In fact, it's directly stated by a side character that the tree had been there for over several millennia. Yet, for some reason, there were never any reports of a beast ravaging the lands or absorbing people and turning them into fruits. You see, this is all relevant since Hagoromo initially believed that the reason why the Ten-Tails went on a rampage was due to it being robbed of its own chakra, referring to the chakra Kaguya had stolen from it. However, Black Zetsu later revealed that the Ten-Tails wasn't just the divine tree, it was Kaguya herself. It wasn't the divine tree's incarnation trying to reclaim its chakra fruit, but Kaguya's will attempting to take back the chakra that had been dispersed into her children. So this somewhat explains why instead of gradually absorbing the chakra of the planet and all living things, the Ten-Tails became aggressive and more obvious in its exploits. It was influenced by the will of Kaguya who had once merged with it. In fact, the god tree present during the war during Naruto was also slowly gaining sentience by first gaining the ability to speak. It was no longer just a mindless entity. This was shown when it spoke to Madara asking him to take it into him so that they can become one. So if the Ten-Tails in the war had remained in that state for longer than 3 days, it likely would have undergone a similar evolution to the one present in Boruto. This simply means that the Ten-Tails, and by extension the clones created using the Ten-Tails, can be influenced by the person who has bonded with it, similar to Shin Uchiha and his clones. Shin treated them like expendable substitutes whilst also instilling them with his worldview of survival of the fittest and that old flesh needs to be disposed of. So when Shin himself became this old flesh, he was well disposed of. A similar thing will happen to Code, since he also views these clones as disposable tools used to achieve his goals of evolution. But since he has also instilled his goals and will into these claw grimes, they will also hope to achieve the same thing as well, that of course being evolution. So as Boruto pointed out in chapter 2, these claw grimes are enhanced due to what Code did to them, which of course is referring to Code infusing them with his claw marks that consist of the iron from his blood and his chakra. In addition to that, they also now share the same will as Code, which is the will to evolve and become a peerless existence, the will to become a god. So by Code changing the nature of the Ten Tails similar to what Kaguya did as confirmed by Black Zetsu, they now have a different focus. Bearing a chakra fruit is no longer the driving force behind their existence due to them possessing self-awareness. That simply means that no longer will they pass off the power in the form of a chakra fruit for someone else to consume. It will instead keep the power for itself and use it to evolve. And that is actually what Boruto was referring to when he told Code that he doesn't understand the true horrors of the Ten Tails and that he needs to get rid of them while he's still in control. This clearly foreshadows Code losing control of the beast, which will ultimately lead to his demise. With that being said, this could just be complete nonsense and everything I just said doesn't make any sense whatsoever, okay? I could be totally wrong, and it's also possible that these new Shinju gods or divine trees are just similar to the white Zetsus that were also created by the Ten Tails or the original Ten Tails from Naruto. You see, the white Zetsus had the ability to absorb someone's chakra signature, then use it to replicate their physical appearance. The only difference is that this Ten Tail seems to be able to replicate the abilities as well, and it also doesn't take their full complete appearance, it just looks like them in some way. So that's why I'm leaning more to what I said about the Otsutsuki DNA, and that's how they use it to evolve, and then also take their genetic data to replicate their looks in some way, because if it was the same ability as the white Zetsus, they would just take the exact appearance of the person they're copying, which clearly isn't the case here. One more thing to note is that the Ten Tails has always had the ability to separate its body into multiple parts. This was first shown in the war when the Ten Tails created these mini Jubi clones, and also the fact that the Ten Tails was able to split itself in half and was able to let out one half to become the divine tree, while the other half remained in Obito and kept him as the Ten Tails Jinchuriki. And this ability also passed down to the other tail beasts as well, since the Three Tails, I believe, was able to separate itself into multiple parts. So this is nothing new per se, it's just twisted in a different way somewhat. But I think the major difference between using that ability and these new entities is that they seem to have different personalities. So it's similar to how Hagoromo separated the Ten Tails and created multiple different entities like Tail Beasts 1 through 9, and Kuruma's personality is different from the 1 Tails and the 8 Tails and the 5 Tails. They're all different beings with different personalities, even though they were created using the same chakra. So a similar process has occurred here, and it seems like the trigger for this was Code's claw marks. So this is very interesting. Of course, you don't know everything about them, but one thing I can say is that power-wise, they seem to be relative to like base Boruto at best. So I think that puts them at least above Jigen, since base Boruto seems to be above No Limiter Code, who is also above Jigen. But if you want to learn more about that power scaling mechanic, you guys can open up the video about how strong is Boruto, or Boruto is the strongest shinobi, and I go in depth about how Boruto, or why Boruto scales above No Limiter Code, and why these guys are relative to this new Boruto. With that being said, let me know your thoughts on the video itself. Drop a like if you like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace out.